Great, thank you. So I've changed this up a bit. So I'm just going to go through what the CEC Club is and go back to the agenda, and it changed. What the Circular Economy Club is, just a little brief. I don't want to bore you guys too much with all of that stuff because you're here for the nitty-gritty of the conversation, right? I already gave you a brief of what SIEL is. Okay, Karen. So we have Karen, who is from, Karen, are you in Jamaica right now? And yes, because we're currently, Karen is saying that she may have to step out in a little bit because she is in Jamaica, right? So she has some stuff. No problem, Karen, that's fine. I appreciate you being here. Right, so we're gonna jump into a little bit of context and straight into the panel discussion. So I'm changing up this a little bit. Anna, next slide. Right, so as we move on, I know Emma and Kyle sent me their official bios, but sometimes, you know, it's good to just hear directly from people what they are. I forgot to change this on the slide, Emma, so I apologize. Emma is no longer at Resource Features UK.
Oh, Sean, we lost you.
Right, so Emma is no longer at Resource Features UK. She was there for a number of years, but she has now taken on the mantle of consultant at Lighthouse Sustainability. I told her I love the name, right? So Emma, could you share with everyone a bit of what you do now at Lighthouse Sustainability?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sean. Yeah, literally Friday was my last day at the Resource Futures. So I'm running my own business now. So I help businesses and organizations transition to more circular business models. So that tends to be kind of trying to translate some of the the complexities around circularity and what that means. So I work very practically, kind of one-to-one with business owners, and I also do training. And I've got a little sort of special love for working with startups. So I'm working with 2 or 3 startups in the reuse space. So that's what I do.
Excellent. Kyle, would you mind? So this is Kyle Santos. Kyle is also the owner of Kyle Santos Consulting Limited. He's wearing another hat currently, but he's in his capacity as consultant of Kyle Santos Consulting. So Kyle, a little bit about what you do.
Thanks, Sean. And much like Emma, as you said, I'm right now also in a transition. So while my own consulting business, which has been around and functioning in Trinidad for the last 5 years, has focused a fair bit on waste management and working with companies in Trinidad and Tobago on improving their approaches to waste management. I am now transitioning to a role that's actually climate-based. So I'm leading the net zero implementation for one of the large professional services firms in the US. But have a long history, about over a decade in sustainability, a good chunk of which was focused on waste management, circular economy, and so on.
Excellent, awesome, Kyle. And I wish you all the best in this new journey that you are on. Same to you, Emma. I'm so excited you're on, on this side.
Thank you.
Right. And I have been, just a little about me. I have been in this waste management sector for this year, celebrated 15 years. I did work for a state waste company I worked there twice. So in total, about 10 years or so. Right. And I really, really do enjoy educating the public about how they can rethink the way they look at, view, interact with waste. So that's what I chose to do. And a fun fact, I used to be a hip hop dancer many years ago. People don't believe me when I say it, but it's true, right? So let's jump right into the discussion. Next slide. Change again. Right, so the Circular Economy Club makes up about 6,500 professionals from about 140 countries in the world. Go back a little bit. Yeah, I know with tech things just try to jump on you when you're not ready, right? And there are local chapters. I am, of course, the chapter holder for Port of Spain, Trinidad. There's certification programs, and there's also the Circular Economy Club online and so on. So if you guys want any more information on the club itself, you could always go to, they're on LinkedIn, on Facebook as well. And they also have the Circular Economy Club website. So next slide, Anand. I don't know why they're not showing well, but that's okay. I kind of know what's on them already. So next one. Right, so here the Circular Economy Club actually has a number of events. So just like now that we have the coronavirus, this one is virtual. So they have a number of events all over the world. They were formerly in person, but now we've had to retool them for the virtual space. Just connecting people and sharing, you know, the good news about the circular economy, as I like to say. There's of course an economic opportunity with being with utilizing circular economy principles and strategies, not just in your businesses, in your organizations, as well. And so this session is really for you to start gaining some ideas, you know, so you can start asking some questions. Why are we not doing certain things? How can I make these things possible? And so on. So we do have there are a number of companies out there that already practice circular economy principles, like Unilever, Nike, Philips after. Joel, I would definitely try to do the slideshow after, because I know it's not sharing. You can't see it as clear on the screen, so I'll try to share the slides with you all after, so no problem. Right? And it really is sourcing of material, manufacturing, logistics, marketing and sales, product use, end-of-life disposals, and reverse logistics, all of which Kyle and Emma are going to share with you all very, very openly, right? Because the waste cycle is typically a linear one. So you take raw material, make it into a product, and then when that product gets to the end of its life, it becomes waste. But the circular economy is breaking up that linear cycle and making it literally into a circular one, where outputs can become inputs for another process. So that's how I explain it simply, so that people understand the difference between how we deal with waste now and what the circular economy calls us to do. Next slide, Anand, please. So as I mentioned, Circular Cities Week was the 26th of October to the 1st of November. And in Circular Cities, of course, we try to, sustainable waste management talks about making less waste, period. So we try to eliminate the concept of what is waste and items that typically throw away, to keep assets at their highest value at all times. And it, of course, is enabled by digital technology. A circular city shows its resilience and works with its citizens to seek out economic growth and pay attention to the consumption of finite resources. Sorry, next slide. Right, so these are some of the other things about what a resilient city is. It assesses, it plans, it acts to prepare and respond to all hazards. So it takes in consideration disaster risks, the value chains, how can we enhance collaboration, establishing local partnerships, enhancing innovation, which I'm a huge advocate for, and designing with the resources that already exist, and funding, of course, and public procurement, which also speaks to innovation. So I will stop here. So Anand, you could stop sharing your screen and the slides, and I will jump straight into the Q&A. So Emma, my first question to you: how can circular economy, hold on, right. Can the circular economy be applied to any sector of business? question to you, Emma.
Absolutely. I'd say 100%, 100% of businesses, because I think people think that it's just about materials, and so manufacturing companies, or even just about waste. So we know it applies to all those sectors, right? So, but I would say it applies to every sector, because to enable those things to happen, and increasingly so in a sort of digital world, we need the apps and the platforms and the data tracking and the consumer facing tools. We also need the finance and the investment world to get behind this, because making money out of a circular business model is, can look and is different. So if you're making, revenue over a rental period, that'll be quite different to a business that is based on making one-off, profit from selling product. So we need that sector to adapt as well. So it means they need to understand it. So, and then we need the marketing sector to get behind it, so that they can explain it. So it's really rare for me to meet a sector where meet somebody that I can't find, a more circular way of them being, even if it's just in their own building, their own offices. So, yeah, I'm yet to find. I mean, the latest NASA program, right? They're reusing the rockets. So I'm yet to find an industry that this doesn't apply to.
Because thanks, Emma. Because I think sometimes we may be, I will use the word scared loosely, right? Of what it would mean. Because oftentimes we have this perception like, okay, if I have to do anything environmental, it's going to cost me a huge amount of money, and I don't want to spend all of this money. So therefore, it doesn't make sense for me to apply. But I think if we can show businesses from as lower level all the way up to the major activities or changes they need to make, I think that will go over a bit better, so that they understand, this is something real, it is here to stay, this is the direction we need to go down. Now you need to ask yourself, how can I make this happen? And where do I start? Yeah? Yeah,
and I think that starts with understanding that it applies to everybody. So that, and the same is true of climate change and carbon. So there's, if you operate in business, it must apply, because you must use resources and you must produce a service or a product. And so 100%. The other thing I would say is that I would impress on businesses or anybody that they're missing a huge opportunity if they don't. So it's not just a good thing to do. It's a massive growth market, and particularly post-COVID, when we're looking to sort of recover economies, looking at being more resilient and looking at being more resourceful is is a really good way to do that. So I would say it's a really good thing. The time is right now to really latch onto it as an opportunity and say, look, consumers are starting to really ask far more questions than they did 5 or 10 years ago. So you want to be in that market.
Exactly. And I remember having a conversation with a business owner in Trinidad, and he said, it is the consumers that he was located on a particular section of the country. We have a street called Ariapita Avenue, where there's a lot of food establishments, and a number of them started making changes, but he was a bit, later. And he said the customers came in and asked him, why haven't you changed yet? Yeah. So that is a fact that the consumer is changing. The consumer is becoming more aware, and we definitely have to be ready to deal with a more engaged consumer population. Definitely. So Kyle, this question is for you. As a Caribbean, do you think we are ready to explore the circular economy principles? And do you have any thoughts on who should take the circular economy Caribbean business?
Thanks, Sean. Before I answer that, I think I'm going to just add on to Emma's response, which I think was absolutely spot on.
Sure.
A lot of, it's fair to say that a lot of companies, whether they provide products or services, may look at their business and say, I don't see how this immediately applies. And Emma explained some of those ways that while, you may be enabling and supporting the circular economy rather than, directly participating in it. But also, as companies, you have a supply chain. whether that's for materials or for goods or for services, your supply chain spend invariably has, and for most businesses, has an outsized environmental and social impact than your operations. And so embedding circular economy principles into your procurement also is a way that any company can participate in and support the circular economy. To your question on the Caribbean, look, we are an area, we are the most tourist dependent region in the world. We are a series of small islands with limited land space, limited resources. We have absolutely no choice but to over time transition to a more circular way of operating. When you throw things away, there is no way, especially on a small island. So I think they're really, your question was whether we're ready. I don't know whether we're ready, but I think we have no choice but to be ready quite quickly. That question of whether we're ready is a tricky one, because that includes political will, business will, demand from various stakeholders. I'm not sure all of that is there right now, but I'm saying that it needs to be there as soon as possible. In terms of who takes the lead, I'm a big proponent of private sector action. I haven't seen a lot in my experience to tell me that waiting on government to put the correct policy and economic signals in place to drive the circular economy is likely to yield the results that we need and the progress that we need. So for me, it would be private sector action and consumer demand is where this really needs to be led. And we don't need to look further than the hospitality industry and tourism industry as for opportunities to where that can be led.
Thanks, Kyle. Emma, in terms of what Kyle just said, in terms of private sector involvement being one of the main drivers and consumer demand, you have any further thoughts on that as well? Because I definitely agree, because I think if we continue to just sit and wait for the government to do things, a lot of things that we hope for won't happen right now.
Yeah,
so
100%. Yeah, no, entirely. And I mean, when you look on sometimes on social media, you see a lot of people saying they need to do something about this and they should change this, and they, particularly about recycling, and they, and I always think, well, who's they? We all work for a business, we all consume products, we all drive down the road, we all do these things. So we all vote for people, hopefully. So that we're all those people. So even in the UK, I mean, we're supposed to be hosting the COP, the climate change, the next big conference this year, but obviously it's been postponed. But part of the messaging around that is like, let's not wait, because governments will postpone things. They do that and things get kicked down the road. So there's all sorts of events going on at the moment, obviously all virtual, about alternative COP and a schools COP and a uni COP and all this sort of stuff. And people just carrying on with it because they're sick to death of just waiting, and then things being watered down and all the rest of it, and politics getting involved. So, absolutely, I think private business is where it's at. If I always say to people, if people can, design this world where we're in, where we can order our dinner on a mobile phone, I'm damn sure we can sort this out, So private business has an enormous amount of power, brain power, financial power, marketing power, all those things. So when I look at some of the amazing things that private businesses have persuaded us to do and buy and how we live, we've got to turn that power back on, back into this challenge, really. And yeah, we need some structural things to change, but certainly in the UK, when the pressure comes from business, that's when things get through Parliament quicker. When the stuff comes from people, it takes ages and ages and ages, So if we can get business behind it, and I very much think the sort of race towards climate change, net zero is now going to really pick up, and I think circular economy is a really vital part of that. So I think actions on waste will have to follow. Yeah.
Okay, and one of the things that you just mentioned was structural things that need to be put in place? What are some of those structural or infrastructural things that you think need to be put in place? And so don't answer it yet. Kyle, your question, because I don't want to forget. Your question is, you know, have you seen the circular economy in practice? You know, if you don't want to name names, you don't have to. But can you share with some examples of how you've seen it can work? So Emma, you answer, and then Kyle, you'll answer.
Okay, cool. So structurally, I think the things that are driving change are, you know, legislation around single-use plastics, legislation around things like recycled content, particularly in plastics. And you know, in the EU, because the UK used to follow EU, you know, Europe's regulations, you know, we've got big drivers on recycling to be collected from households. So, you know, there are always unintended consequences, because actually a lot of those targets didn't affect how businesses recycle things, because that's kept separate, but they still affected the mindset of the individual and the consumer. So, you know, things like ocean plastics has been responded to by bans on some single-use items. That, you know, that was mainly consumer power that pushed that. There were very few businesses asking for that. And similarly with things like recycled content, very few consumers are asking for that because they don't get involved in that depth. But that will affect businesses. So there's some structural things that can really help. I don't think we need to wait for them necessarily, but they are the things that can help redress some of the market imbalances. So you know, if virgin plastic is cheaper than recycled, for example, it's measures like that can help to tip the balance. And that means that if you're starting up in the sector, you can compete on a level playing field with someone making a virgin product. So that's what I mean about structural things. And the other thing, I suppose, is infrastructure in terms of collection and segregation of materials. So, you know, that's the other thing sometimes where the public purse needs to get involved.
Kyle?
Right. You'll notice a trend. I'm very rarely going to only respond to the question I'm asked. Because I completely agree with Emma. And in the Caribbean, many countries find themselves in a position where their waste management infrastructure is not ideal. You know, it's suboptimal, and so there's substantial government investment or private sector investment and development that needs to happen in that. But what would be a concern, and we've all at the same time, we've seen some of these policy measures that Emma mentioned, bans on certain items, styrofoam, plastic bags, etc., happening in the Caribbean, while at the same time those very countries have what I would call immature waste management infrastructure. So, you know, there's a question: are you actually tackling the right problem there? It's a very positive signal, but is this actually tackling the big issue? So there's a real balancing act for countries like those in the Caribbean that need to enhance their approach to waste management and the infrastructure, but we can't afford for them to do that in the old traditional way, because they're going to be investing loads of money into, you know, long life assets that are following the old take, make, dispose system. This investment really needs to be infused with circular economy principles for it to be effective, and that's a balance that is going to have to be struck, and it will be that's no small ask. And we're very glad that people like Shan are around to help encourage and point people in the right direction. The question you asked me was whether I've seen any examples.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so one thing I would say, I mean, surely composting is the ultimate form of circularity. So this is a plug for you, Shan.
Yes, because I remember Kyle and I spoke about this, and there was something I was applying for, and I reached out to Kyle, and he's like, Shan, there's nothing more circular than composting. So you're good. Don't worry about anything. So I remember that comment, Kyle. Go ahead.
So there's that. I mean, most of the examples that come to mind, I mean, for this audience, they're international. They're outside of the Caribbean. But we have seen things now. These, I wouldn't say these necessarily fit the definition of circular, but they're on the journey towards circular. So, for example, Nestle just in the region just launched their paper straws. Paper straws, and even the packaging that the straw is in on your Tetra Pak of juice is now made from recyclable or compostable materials. But some of the other ones that you see, I don't know if people are, I'm sure Emma is familiar with TerraCycle and loops. You can, lots of products that you consume on a day-to-day basis now come in reusable packaging that you can take back and get refilled, or you can mail back and get filled. You can get your ice cream in a really attractive metal container that you send back and you get more ice cream in, or someone else gets ice cream in. My wife has used this quite a bit, a company called Rent the Runway, where instead of going out and buying a dress, I don't know if, my wife doesn't like to wear the same outfit to a wedding. So she will, go and Rent the Runway, rent a fabulous dress, use it for an event, and you send it back. Those sorts of models where it's a rental model as compared to a one-time sale model, as Emma mentioned earlier, certainly, because I think fast fashion is a big culprit, in the way that we currently handle goods and make, dispose. So, but also, I mean, a lot of people in the Caribbean will be familiar with this because I think it's more recent than in some other parts of the world. Think back to how our parents have told us about this on so many occasions. And you're like, when I was young, I only owned this many of this and this many of this, and everything was a hand-me-down and everything was reused, or we repurposed everything. Those are all principles that are aligned with circular economy. So, I think there's a lot of circular economy around us, and in our recent history, and bringing some of those back can be a way to go on this.
Yeah, definitely. I sometimes say that the circular business models are hidden in plain sight. So you've kind of forgotten that you hire a car, right? And people have forgotten that they quite often, if you have a monthly contract on your phone, it's a lease, so you don't own the phone. You might by the end of it, but more likely you'll just send it back to upgrade it. So those things are already all here, and we're using them a lot, and particularly in B2B. A lot of companies hire equipment. That we've got builders here at the moment. All the equipment's hired. It comes in, they use it, it goes back. So I think there are more models out there. They just weren't called circular, and why would you? Because we didn't call disposable stuff linear. So those are kind of just terms that get in the way a bit. But when you start saying about rental, everyone knows about rental, right? It's common as muck. So I think some of the, the UK is awash at the moment with new startups in this space, and there's kind of a race to see who's going to scale up. But reuse is getting a lot more traction with things like Loop, but just reusable coffee cups. Just getting cafes and even venues, and when we get back to venues, sports clubs, that sort of thing, just moving over to that gradually. It's quite a simple way, because they don't necessarily, particularly if you get the user to bring their own, they don't necessarily have to invest in anything. They just facilitate it. They just say, yeah, you can bring your own cup. It might even give you a discount. But they just got to feel comfortable that change. Change just takes time and takes just a bit of behavior change, but it's not necessarily a long, it's not a very high bar. It's not a long way to go. Carl's right. And we have to remember that this society that we're in this kind of revolution, of consumerism, is really only post-war. That's when this all started. So it's actually not that long. It's probably 2 generations, right? So it's not like we're trying to change something that's been with us for 500 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And I really liked what, oh, sorry, Kyle, you wanted to say something?
I was just going to
say,
Emma mentioned, tool rental, and one of my favorite quotes on circular economy. I was in the UK, and my boss at the time was talking about tool rental, and he said, "You don't actually need the drill; you need the hole in the wall." I was like, but of course, I'm a hypocrite because I moved to the States, and one of the first things I bought was a drill.
Yeah, and the thing what I wanted to say just now too is that Kyle, I really like the examples that you shared because it showed how simple the principles can be applied. We don't I think sometimes people will get confused with grandiose and that everything needs to be this big grand thing. But at the end of the day, it can be simple changes. I love the fact that your wife uses the rent the runway thing because you just want the dress to wear for a few hours as opposed to spending thousands of dollars. And then odds are you may never wear it again. So I like those examples that you shared, and that as Emma was saying, these things exist. They have been around. I mean, I was having conversation with my parents who are a little older, and they were telling me stories of what they used to do when they were younger. And the fact that these things were there is just because of convenience, and we're wanting things now and we want them fast, that we've kind of moved away, from some of those principles that we would have learned from very early. And we talked about the coffee cups. I'm like, a colleague of mine told me that a company was more interested in purchasing the compostables rather than just telling their staff members walk with their own coffee mug to work. And I'm like, but why? That's a simple thing. I enjoyed having my own coffee mug, so and I know if somebody used it, if I say it on somebody else, that's mine, but those are the things that we need to return to. I had my own fork, knife, spoon, plate, all in the office, right? So if I needed anything, just went and wash it out, leave it there to dry, put it back in my desk, and we move on to tomorrow. So we have to really start getting back to those ideas because as I said, we've definitely increased our consumption, and the UN is already pointing to a number of things that can happen if we don't start making shifts. But it's simple shifts that we can make. We're not saying that you just have to go and buy a whole host of things immediately. There are simple shifts that can be made. So guys, we are almost to the end because I promised you I wasn't going to keep you guys long, right? So what are some of the things then that you would like to, so this is to both you guys, both Emma and Kyle, so whoever wants to go first can answer it, right? What are some of the takeaway things that you would want Petal, Karen, Risha, Joelle, and others, because I'm going to be sharing this on my social media as well. What are some of the takeaways that you would say for people who are questioning what this whole circular economy thing is about and needing to apply the principles to what they do? So you guys can answer that.
Carl, do you want me to go?
Yeah,
sure. I think what you said about simplicity is really, really important. I would just start with that because you're absolutely right. I mean, the first principle, even in the waste hierarchy, before you even get to circularity, is reduce, right? So if you start to look at your own personal, consumption or your business, where you can reduce waste, but actually just reduce consumption and starting to find other ways, that can sometimes fund other more expensive things. So like you say, some things do take investment. Some people know I can't go that far and I can't invest in that, but you can if you start to trim some of the wastage in your business, and that can apply to energy as well as raw materials. So I'd say just look at the really simple things. I think something we haven't quite touched on is skills as well. So the skills that people need to do more repair, more remanufacture. And this is really not that long ago that we had all these skills on the high street, and it's okay. You can still get some things repaired, but some things are starting to slip away now. And the thing that people can do is they can challenge brands and they can say, look, I want you to be able to repair this. I want to be able to send this back. I want to be able to recycle this. And that peer pressure, that consumer pressure, is really, really, really powerful. And I know that a lot of things have happened with brands purely because they feel quite pressured by consumers. So use your voice. And if you can take some small steps, it kind of tends to snowball because people quite like it. They go, oh, people don't go, oh, I don't feel good about this. They get on board, they want to do positive things. So actually, I think what people will find when they start to adopt some of these ideas, A, it's not that hard, B, it's all around us. You just need to take the blinkers off, and the more you talk about it, the more the signals will go, and the more that businesses will act. So that would be my takeaway.
Great. So I'll say 4 things quickly. One of which Emma already mentioned. So I'll just say it's vote with your wallet. The other one is, and these are in no particular order. Bear in mind that recycling is not circular economy. Recycling is actually a slight failure of the circular economy. So I think that's an important differentiation to keep in mind. If you're in a business, chances are that most businesses have not thought very hard on this, and you don't have to think that hard on this. If you get you and your production manager and your procurement people, get a few people in a room, think about this for 2 hours. Put 2 hours out of your week and think about what circular economy means for your business. I guarantee you will come up with procurement, product, service ideas, and it will be a useful. It'll be time well spent. And the 4th thing is, this is one of the first calls I've been on for a long time that hasn't mentioned COVID. So I'll be the one to mention COVID. We can't be tone deaf, and I personally do think COVID has been a step back for circular economy and other things because of the sort of resurgence of single-use plastic and concerns about health and safety, etc. But we just need to realize that that's temporary. So we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater just because health and safety concerns. Yes, those are here now, but we do need to think about what a green recovery looks like, and that doesn't just go for economic revival, but that's how do you in your life or your business, in your personal life or in your business, go back to normal and plan for that now.
Thank you very much, Kyle and Emma. So I'm going to just give about 5 minutes or so if Karen, Joel, or Petal have any questions that they would like to ask to Emma and Kyle before we end today's session. But you guys are very, very right. Kyle, I purposely did not mention COVID, on purpose. Because we know that it is here. We're all affected by it. But as you said, it presents, because someone asked me about the challenges that I may have faced, and what has it done to this particular waste management sector. And I said it poses a challenge, but it also presents some opportunities to take that time, as you're saying, Kyle, to sit and really ask yourself, how can we apply this? What does it mean for us to be able to do this? What are some of the solutions? And as you said, you will find in almost any department that you have in your organization, you could apply the circular economy principle. It's not just in manufacturing or just for, certain in the food sector. It's not, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not separate from any sector. And Emma mentioned this in the very beginning of her talk. In almost any sector that you can think of, the principles can be applied. So it's not that's not for us kind of reaction, So I really, really like the points that you made, and Emma, the point about individual power is really important, because I really don't think we understand how much power we do have as consumers. And as Kyle said, vote with your wallet. And the minute we stop doing that, how much of an impact it will have on these brands, that in terms of what we want them to do and what they should and shouldn't be doing. So let me stick a pin Petal, Joel, Karen, do you all have any questions for Emma or Kyle before we wrap up? Okay, Petal says no, she's good. Petal says it's been great listening. Okay. Karen, hi.
Questions. I just wanted to, I'm not sure how I got the invitation for this, but I'm based in Jamaica. I'm half Trini, my mom is Trini. But I think I've been researching circular economy because the company that I work for, the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, will soon have a component that will be looking at regional circular economy issues. So I'm very glad that I was able to join, and I will of course be following up with Sian and Kyle. I think the only thing I wanted to say that I think I heard, I had to slip off, but I heard somebody say was culturally in the Caribbean, we started more with the culture of reuse and saving and having a drawer full of plastic bags and all those kinds of things. So it really, some of it is as somebody said, going back to where we had come from in terms of the reuse of some of the items that we had. And we use, you know, I still have as they call it, the big back TVs. We do already have some of those aspects in us, and it really is to figure out how that becomes useful for us going forward. So thank you for the introduction, and I will be in touch to hear more.
Wonderful, Karen. And I mean, the guy that normally fixes our small appliances, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I repaired our fan. And he's like, Shan, I don't think you could bring the fan again after this last time. So, I mean, it is something that I always ask myself, can I fix it first? If I can fix it, I'm going to fix it, right? And that was really important until the guy who was doing the repairing said, okay, Shan, I think it's reached its last repair. If it goes down again after this, unfortunately, I know it, because I tell him I don't like throwing things away, right? So he's like, unfortunately, you'll have to throw it away, right? Or find somebody who can take it from you or something like that. So we've had this culture. It's just that because things have changed over time, it's more of, you know, it has taken us away from these principles that we grew up with, you know. And as Petal, let me just read some of the comments. Petal said, do what you can with what you have with where you are. Petal, I say that all the time, you know, girl, you're a girl after my own heart. And Joel says, I think Kyle and Emma have, so let me just read what she says. Joel says, I think Kyle and Emma have really touched on elements that I've researched and believe in. My only question now is how to get started locally, right? So, Joel, of course, there are a number of things that Kyle and Emma talked about today. You just have to figure out which part of, because Joel is interested in working in this sector, in the waste management sector. And he and I have a little bit of a chat a little later today, because he's been trying to figure out how could he apply the skills that he's learned, because he has an engineering background, to help us solve some of these issues that we have locally, right? And I'm a huge advocate for innovation, because there are many things that we could just make better, many, before we even look at the invention part, right? So, Kyle and Emma, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time. I know there are a few people who wanted to come on. I am going to be putting this on my YouTube channel so people can look at it after. I want to say thank you to you both. Thank you for taking time to be with me on this. This week is also Global Entrepreneurship Week, I believed. I did not purposely time it to be this, to be but I'm happy that it fell in the week anyway. So I'm piggybacking off of Global Entrepreneurship Week 2020, as this is our SIELT event, but I want to thank you so very much for taking the time to chat with us today. Karen, you feel free to reach out to me and we could continue the conversation thereafter. And Joel and I will have our chat. And I may reach out to you, Emma and Kyle, if there are other questions, because I don't profess to be a guru of all things. If there's something I don't know I have people like you guys who I can ask my tons of questions to. Right? So thank you so much. Thank you, Anand, for providing support to our webinar this morning. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Petal, Joel, and everyone else that was able to join us today. I just want to say a huge, huge thank you for taking the time out of your day to be with us. So I wish you guys all the best. Emma and Kyle, love you both. Thank you so much. Y'all take care. Be
You're
good.
most welcome.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks very much.
Mommy is